Greetings and welcome to the Department of Tangents podcast, a conversation with writer, stand-up, and television host Guy Branum, plus new music from PR Newman. I'm honored to have Branum on this week. He's an accomplished television writer, having worked on Chelsea Lately and with Joan Rivers, as well as on one of the most consistently entertaining sitcoms of the past decade, The Mindy Project. He also currently hosts the talk show The Game Show on truTV, on which guests get points for witty stories, just the right amount of name-dropping to avoid getting a yellow card, jokes and applause breaks. It's a fresh and funny show and reminds me of Match Game in a way that the Match Game revival doesn't. And he puts his pop culture knowledge to good use on the Pop Rocket podcast on the Maximum Fun Network. The bulk of the interview is about Branum's new book, My Life as a Goddess, a memoir through unpopular culture. The book shows off who Branum is at his core. It's funny, compassionate, sarcastic, smart, and poignant. Branum tells the story of how a kid from a small but diverse agricultural town in California went from law school to the entertainment industry, how he came out and dealt with both self-loathing and the reproach of his family, and how important television was and is to him. Along the way, you can learn about pop culture, world history, and mythology, among other things. The goddess in the title is a reference to a particularly important mythological figure in Branum's personal history, Leto, sister and lover of Zeus and mother of Apollo and Artemis. Branum tells of how Zeus's wife Hera cast Leto out of Mount Olympus and cursed anyone who would give her shelter. She was forgotten and abused for months, and the phrase that stuck with Branum comes when Leto had had enough. Then she remembered that she was a goddess. That is kind of a personal mantra for Branum, and we start the conversation with that idea. Stick around after the interview for new music from PR Newman, the new solo project from singer-songwriter multi-instrumentalist Spencer Garland. Garland also happens to be next week's guest, so you'll get a little preview of what he's all about. But before we get to that, I am proud to present Guy Branum.
Were you aiming this book at a specific audience?
Not really. I mean, I sort of understood it's something that I'm making, so the majority of the readers will probably be women and gay guys. But I really just wanted to write something that was me. You know, like when I'm doing stand-up and I'm writing for TV, I'm always kind of structuring what I'm doing to fit the form. And I wanted to just do something that was sort of like a broader and more indulgent representation of who I am and what I think is funny and interesting.
And that story that you start with, then she remembered she was a goddess.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of being who you are instead of who you're supposed to be. How hard is it to remember that?
It's a constant struggle. Like, it's not something... I kind of hate, like, self-helpy stuff where people are saying, like, oh, I used to be messed up, but now I'm fixed. I have seen the light. Like, I guess there are ways that that's true, but I always think that it's a struggle, that it's an ongoing thing of, like, remembering, like, hey, I'm capable. I have powers. I think that the world is, and other people are so frequently trying to make you think you're not valuable enough. And you've got to listen to it because the world is, you know, it's going to serve you up some losses periodically. And you just have to remember that, like, you can affect the outcome. You do have power.
Yeah, and the part of the self-improvement is listening to them, but still judging whether, you know, what the outside world is telling you is true or not. You can't just... I mean,
the book is about remembering your perspective is important, too.
Uh-huh.
Like, I think I grew up really, you know, not certain of what my perspective was supposed to mean because the people around me were so certain that it was, like, damaged or inappropriate.
Do you ever really lose that, though, that sort of quest for what your perspective is, or is that constantly changing?
I think that's a journey. I think that gay people are taught that our perspective doesn't matter and is wrong. And getting past that is a lifelong struggle because the world was really built around for so much of my life, saying that it was a damaged thing. It's like Less, a novel that won the Pulitzer last year. Gay guys, most gay guys still don't know that it exists. Nobody cares about it because we are uncomfortable paying attention to something that is about our perspectives. We're so frequently, that's why we cling to the perspectives of women so hard, because we don't know if we're allowed to have a perspective of our own. We got to have something. And I mean, I think just being a human is a hard game of balancing. How much am I supposed to listen to other people and how much am I supposed to trust my gut?
Well, and representing each other's stories is a tough thing, I think, as a writer as well. I mean, you mentioned one point, I forget the story you were telling, but it was sort of an offhanded remark. You're probably, if you are this person, you're probably tired of hearing a white man tell a story that's not his to tell.
Yeah.
I forget where that is in the book, but that's in there somewhere.
It's in the chapter about football and Punjabis in my town.
Oh, right. Well, as a writer, you want to tell a lot of different kinds of stories. How do you approach a story that you don't necessarily think is your story to tell?
I mean, I don't know that I necessarily have the best rules for it, but I think respectfully is a good place to start. Mm-hmm. I know that, and my perspective on this is really influenced by being a stand-up comic, because for the first 10 years of stand-up, gayness was something that everybody was talking about, but there really weren't that many gay men on stage doing the talking. Mm-hmm. And, I got kind of annoyed with constantly having their vision of what being a gay guy was like be represented. And so trying to have some humility as a storyteller, which can be hard because, part of what being a storyteller is about is controlling the narrative and very much being in charge of it. And, so when I always, in a deep way, felt you couldn't understand who I was if you didn't understand the little town that I came from, and you couldn't understand that little town if you didn't understand very interesting demographics. Little town in Northern California that is about half white, quarter Mexican, and quarter Punjabi Sikh farmers. But once I was done with that, I then sent it to some people to basically be like, hey, it's okay. And one of the cool things about it was that my editor was South Asian, so Rakesh Satyal, and I got to have a little bit of confidence that or my slaughtering of a Hindu story wouldn't be too offensive, because if it were, he would be like, guys, stop this.
Now, you also talked about how you loved Eddie Murphy's Delirious, and watched it later as an adult. That sort of ties into the perspective thing, and found how gay bashing that it was.
Yeah, it was really surprising. It would have been in 2013 when I was working for Totally Biased with W. Kamau Bell. Just one night I came home because I didn't have a TV. I just watched stuff off of my laptop, and so I went to YouTube and I was like, "Hey, can I watch this?" And it was there, and all I remembered is that it was the best comedy special ever. And then I watched it, and the first 5 minutes are all about how gross gay men are. And I was a little bit shocked to realize this thing that had gotten in there and so influenced my mind to love stand-up had also influenced my mind clearly to think that gay people were gross, and that this was, part of many things that held me in the closet until I was 23.
And you just hadn't remembered that part of it?
I mean, while I was watching it, I was like, I remembered all of those jokes, but those weren't the thing that sprang first to my mind. And also, I just took for granted that, that was something people would joke about. That, like, that was, you know, in the 1980s, talking about how gross gay people were was just a normal part of human culture. I say that, of course, derisively. I don't think it was okay. I just think that it was normalized. But, like, it was not at the forefront of my memory. There were other things that were at the forefront of my memory.
But do you remember reacting to those at all? Was it just, even to you as a kid, that was just normal and wasn't remarkable?
I mean, it was, you know, it was better crafted, but the same content as what I was hearing from classmates, family members, TV shows. You know, like, it was, we had a world that hated gay people and was built to make gay people hate themselves.
And you were still able to find something to take from that for your comedy. You mentioned Margaret Cho took some of that swagger and some of that style and turned it in a different...
Yeah, I mean, there's the great moment, and I think it's I'm the One That I Want, where she says, if Richard Pryor had a period, he would have talked about it. And that was, like, such an important guide to me, was understanding, like, you take from these icons what you have, but also understand that your different perspective gets to inform the way you do comedy.
So when you were a kid, did you think you were funny? I mean, you didn't start doing comedy until law school, correct?
Yeah, no, it was after law school. It's funny that I didn't talk more about that dynamic in the book, but it literally just comes down to there weren't many people around me who found what I was saying funny. My mom did, and periodically my dad did, and that was cool, but, like, the people I went to school with really didn't get it. Sometimes they did, but, like, most of the jokes were just for my benefit. Like, you know, it was very Pride and Prejudice. It was all in my head. And that, you know, it took a fair amount of time of me being around people who did get the joke before I really started being convinced that I could joke professionally.
And it was when you were, actually, it was when you had the worst job, the most soul-sucking job.
Yeah.
Described in the book that you started, right? That was where you were working for that?
Yeah, it was while I was working as a contract attorney for a law firm. And it was, you know, it was a truly terrible job where I was keeping people from getting money for cancer, for toxic torts, from toxic torts, and I was really just, you know, didn't understand. Like, I really understood that I was doing something terrible, but I was making decent money, so I was able to use that sort of, like, stability and self-hatred to motivate a change in my life. And I started doing stand-up. I needed an escape, an emotional escape.
So it's no coincidence that that's when it started, when you had that job?
No, not at all. Like, one very much led to the other.
But why stand-up? What pushed you to that particularly?
It's very interesting. This week I met Bob the drag queen from RuPaul's Drag Race. And, you know, I was always sort of interested because, you know, we don't have many or any really very successful gay male stand-up comedians. And I found out that Bob did drag for the first time, that he also did stand-up for the first time, and it was at a stand-up show, or at a stand-up club in New York. And I sometimes wonder, like, why didn't you go into sort of, like, the more traditionally understood field for funny gay guys? And I think part of that is just the way that I'm, you know, built. I didn't think that would work well. I think I came out relatively late, so I didn't start thinking about drag until years after I had already started sort of, like, secretly planning a desire to do stand-up. Mm-hmm. But most of it just came down to I couldn't believe in myself long enough to do anything else. Like, to write a screenplay or a novel, you really have to, like, believe in yourself for an extended period of time to get it together. And for stand-up, I mean, a joke is short, and I knew that I could believe in myself long enough to write a joke.
Mm-hmm. But it's also very immediate that standing on stage, you get that judgment immediately right back at you.
Well, I think as somebody who, like, for so much of my life didn't understand what other people wanted, or, you know, and felt very different, there was something really good for me to have to take my material and put it in front of other people and say, is this working or not? And it involved a lot of failure, but that failure teaches you really important lessons. Mm-hmm. Like, today, working in a TV writer's room, there's just a difference between people who have been on stage a lot and those who have not. The ones who have been on stage a lot have an innate sense of how an audience is going to react and just understand that aspect of comedy better.
I assume also there are two ways you can go as somebody who faced judgment constantly. As I feel in the book you described, you did face judgment constantly for every other aspect of your life. You'd either become gun-shy about it or immune to it.
I mean, yeah, like, I just got used to it, you know? Like, I would never say I was immune to it, but, like, I was used to it. And having it be a group of people instead of one person, you know, didn't really affect it that much. I mean, like, you do hate yourself after you bomb. Like, it's not fun. But you know, you dust yourself off and you come back and you go at it again.
When did you start harboring that secret that you wanted to do stand up?
Oh, like, you know, I think from the first moment I saw stand up, I was like, oh, that's so wonderful. I would like to do that. And I think the more I saw different voices, like, fill the medium with, like, their style, I became more hooked. But I remember particularly in college one time, I said something and my friend Lorelai was like, we have to get you to an open mic. And I was just like, yes, I want that. I want that so much. And after that, I was like, you know, well, how do I figure out where an open mic is? How do I do this? And, you know, I just wanted to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. I hear from a lot of comics when they started comedy was when they first realized, oh, I can actually do this. Or like a regular person can try this. It didn't seem like something that, it seemed like some fantasy world, like you had to grow up in New York or something to qualify to do it.
Like, I was really lucky. Like, when I was, you know, in Yuba City, it felt so far away. But, like, San Francisco had, like, a cool actual scene, and I, like, you know, I kind of understood that once I was in college that it was something that was just waiting for me across the bay, but it still took me, you know, a very decent number of years before I actually tried it.
Do you think that and you make it very clear you weren't happy growing up in the town you grew up?
I mean, I was happy and unhappy. I think everyone is in their life. I just, you know, part of it is a joke. Part of it is camp, making such a big deal out of how much I hated the town I was from. But part of that is also that I always really felt it hated me. But I interrupted. What were you asking?
Oh, no, you're getting to that. What I was thinking was, did that help shape you in any beneficial way growing up where you grew up and having that antagonistic relationship with your...
Well, I mean, I think that growing up the place I grew up, like, really did shape me in a bunch of great ways. I'm glad that I have, like, such a practical understanding of how the world works. I'm glad that I lived somewhere where, like, the life cycle of plants defined the way everybody led their life. I like that I grew up in a place where almost everybody's dad was a farmer or a construction worker, so I understand, you know, how cement gets finished and everything like that. But I think mostly growing up in a place that didn't seem to have a place for me makes me so thankful for the place I do live now.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, my mom trying to do a really good job to make me think about people who were forgotten by the world around them. And I think that mainly came from her being Jewish. And that was like a really important priority for her. And I think I always, you know, was very aware of it. And, you know, my dad, as somebody who really felt like he fit in to this space better, he really like trusted it more. And I think I really understood that as a difference in my parents, like the ability to just kind of like trust that like normal was fine, and understand like normal doesn't work for some people.
The Liberty Valance chapter was a great chapter, by the way.
Thanks.
That idea when legend becomes fact, print the legend.
Print the legend, yeah.
Yeah, but that idea that there was some wiggle room and maybe that your father was trying to reach you in some way or cared for you in some way, but it wasn't necessarily a way you could feel, that you were allowing for possibilities there.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. He loved me. He didn't know how to show it, and he also was so frequently judgmental of me in the way that I showed love. And one of the things that's really weird about this book is I know that he would have hated it, and I know that he would have been really mad about it. And I have to ask, like, is it more respectful for me to, you know, not do something like this because he would have hated it, or to do it because it is me and how I show love and how I understand the world. And the thing is like, for so much of my life, I tried to love him by not being who I was, because that was what he asked of me, or he didn't ask, it's what he demanded of me. And so in this book, I just decided to love him and try to respect him and, you know, give, like, honesty and credence to so much of the good stuff he did for me and us, but also to, like, acknowledge other factors, because to me, that's what loving someone is seeing the whole of them. And, you know, it was so weird watching that movie, because it really was, like, so much about us and so much about different worldviews from people who were trying to appreciate and help each other.
Mm-hmm. And you were surprised when you saw it, how resonant?
I was, yeah. And like, he always said that was his favorite movie, but I don't know when the last time he saw it was, and I don't know if he ever would have seen that movie. He wouldn't have. There's no way he would have seen that movie and understood, like, oh, this is like me and Guy.
And has your sister threatened to sue you yet for talking about her?
I don't know that she knows that the book has happened yet. I'm sure once she knows about the book, she will have opinion.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Is that something you worry about? I mean, you're trying to tell your story, and these people are a part of your story, but it's also their story that you're telling. Yeah,
it's hard. It is a hard balance. You know, you have to balance it legally, but you also have to balance it just sort of like personally and morally. And it's hard, and I realize there are ways that, like, one misconstrues things just because of the way you see them. Like, my friend Chris, who I worked with at the Mindy Project, I refer to him getting a job immediately out of college. And he spent 3 years sort of struggling in LA. And to me, that seems so quick as to not even matter. And he made a comment about that, and I felt bad because, you know, it really made clear the way that I just sort of, like, in the process of telling somebody else's story, even a tiny bit of it, just only saw it through my perspective. And he was great, and he was like, struggle is not part of my brand. What's important is you made it seem like I was much younger than I am. And I was like, okay, good. But, I tried to be respectful most of the time. When it came to my sister, I was just trying to give an impression of who she was through legally defensible terms, and then move away from that and talk about the exact opposite. Because, my sister is kind of an emotional vampire who will suck up the energy from any space that she is in.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted people to get that feeling, but also to not belabor it or to make, anything that would be able to screw up my life. Like, I know that she will screw up my life if she gets a chance.
And so you did that by giving a sort of primer on Canadian history.
Yeah, because, Canada is like the opposite of my sister. My sister is a person who, she fights a lot and tries to control things a lot. And Canada is a country that is built on a hope of cooperation, and I really respect that.
I also like that the word epiphany was so important to you early on, and how that was just the word, not the meaning of it, but the word.
It sounded so nice, and like trying to figure out what that nice sounding word meant was one of the great struggles of my childhood. I remember being on the schoolyard and just saying it quietly to myself, because it's such a nice word. It needed to be used.
And it was in the context of a search for snacks in the midst of a kind of holiday drought that you...
Yes. And it wasn't even a holiday drought. There had been a lot of holidays leading up to it. I just wanted another one. Yeah. It was just like, I got excited about the little words that were underneath the date in a calendar, and then I came to one of them and I didn't know what it was, and my mom couldn't tell me what it was, and so I had to go out and learn something on my own, which taught me some pretty valuable skills.
And I love that that's the origin of it, though. That was another part that I sort of recognized, because I had somewhat of a similar word. My word was scruples.
Uh-huh.
That sent me on that sort of journey to look and see what that means. And it because my mom was reading a book that was...
Oh, yeah, scruples, yeah.
It had that title. And then I used that in like a fourth grade essay. And our writing teacher was very impressed. How did you know this word? And it was because it was the title of a novel, and I had no idea what the word meant, so I looked it up.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was a letter to King George. We all had to write a letter to King George from the colonists, and I had the sentence in there, "Have you no scruples?"
Oh, that's cool. Scruples, was that a Jacqueline Suzanne novel?
I don't know. I can look it up quickly.
No, it was like a really popular novel in the 80s, right?
Yeah, I think it was one that like everybody had lying around. Judith Krantz.
Judith Krantz, yes.
That's who it was.
Wonderful.
I like the idea that it's this impossible confluence of circumstance that leads to something that's so incredibly important in your life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what... there's a chapter that is about the Passover Seder I hold every year. And I realize it's kind of silly and indulgence to talk so much about something nobody cares about, except for me. But the whole point of it really is that, our lives, there's so much beauty in our lives, but also so much randomness that, you don't know what's going to be delivered up to you, but also so many good things are being delivered up to you all the time. You have to remember that. You have to remember that, the universe has great bounty and is taking care of you. Even when it feels like things are rough and you are having the worst luck, you really do have a lot of wonderful things that you should, remember and be excited about.
But it occurs to me that this ties in, or could tie in, with your love of pop culture, the sort of randomness of you don't know exactly what's going to stick, what's going to be delightful or impactful to you.
I mean, I really miss the days of watching the television. The television tells us to watch. The fact that we get to decide what we watch, I think, is kind of bad. But,
in what way?
I just feel like, in only selecting what we want, we're forgetting about the things we don't know we want yet. And it's why I really enjoy watching television at a hotel, because you watch TV like it's 1996, and you never know what's just going to pop out and, like, delight and entertain you.
It does start to feel like an assignment sometime, even if there's a lot of incredible stuff that you enjoy. You feel like, I haven't finished binging this series.
Right.
There are already 10 more series coming up.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it can feel like homework, which is really annoying, but also it's the most delectable. Like, I just binged all of Schitt's Creek. I had not seen it, and then I watched it, and it's wonderful. And, it's cool that all this stuff is just sitting there on your, like, Apple TV or whatever, just waiting for you.
My wife and I binged Mindy Project couple of months ago. I have this hang up that I don't want to start watching a TV show unless I can watch it from the beginning, especially if I know that it's, in sequence. You have to do things for that. So that kept me, I had only watched a couple of episodes before that and thought it was quite wonderful. Well, then we had this compact experience of over, I think, 3 weeks. We started and finished it. We have, what was it, six seasons? So now that came into and left our lives in 3 weeks instead of the 6 that fans had to watch it.
That's so funny because, like, I watched so many people toil on that show for years, and to think that it's something that could be consumed so quickly. But it was a great show with great people. It's one of the most fun working experiences I've had in my life. And it was also getting to be part of, like, a Girl in the City show was, like, so much speaking to, like, what I loved and wanted to do when I was a kid, and the fact that it was, a woman of color, a South Asian woman, was something that was almost unimaginable when I was a child. Like, it was really awesome to be part of that show.
Yeah, going back to being a kid and watching the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Yeah, and, I don't talk about Mary Tyler Moore in the book, but, like, I fucking loved Mary Tyler Moore. And the Mindy Project was really Mary Tyler Moore, but funnier, maybe.
But you started writing at G4. It was, what, the tech channel? Before that? He went
Tech TV,
from G4 to Chelsea Lately, which seems like that's sort of a breakneck turn, going from one to the other there.
It was really wonderful. Like, when I was at G4, I spent, like, I would goof off at work by paying attention to celebrity gossip. And, once I worked at Chelsea Lately, I would goof off from work by paying attention to video game news and politics. And, when I worked at Totally Biased with W. Kamau Bell, I would goof off by paying attention to celebrity gossip and stuff. Like, we are complex people with a variety of interests, but it was really fun. It was, like, also going from writing for, like, 13-year-old boys to writing for, professional women, like the people who watched Chelsea Lately. It was nice. It was a nice change of pace for me. First of all, they just liked the show and didn't spend a huge amount of time on message boards talking about what people had gotten wrong. So, that was really cool. It was fun. Like, more than anything, like, getting to do all of these things is just fun.
Well, it's interesting how different each experience was. How Chelsea Lately to Joan Rivers and Fashion Police, the G4 and Mindy Project. You can get the idea that there's this myth of the writer's room, and that's what a writer's room on any show is like. But it doesn't like they're all completely different.
Yeah, all of them take very different approaches to how a joke gets written, and it's been interesting to see the various results that the various processes produce.
I especially enjoyed hearing about Joan Rivers and working with her.
And that was just, it was magnificent to be in the room with, a legend, like one of the people who formed my first opinions about stand-up. It was amazing. But also there's something really cool about having to produce. I didn't have enough time to be awed by the situation because I had to start writing some jokes. And, that was good pressure that helped, helped me handle the situation and do the job I needed to do.
Does it seem more regular to you now? You've contributed to so many different shows and you've been doing it for a lot longer. Are you more comfortable in it now? Is there a more standardized feel to it?
Absolutely. But, it's you're always nervous on a new show. You're always will I fit in here? Will I make friends? Mm-hmm. But, I've just done it enough now that, I know how that works.
Mm-hmm. How much did comedy help in sort of finding yourself? When you started comedy, you were at a very sort of, I don't know if you'd characterize it this way. It seemed like you were at a very vulnerable stage where a lot was changing in your life.
Well, what's so interesting is that, starting stand-up with, a punctuation mark that declared, I know who I am. And I don't know that it was entirely true, but I think the effort of saying it was really good. It was really funny the way that, moving and starting stand-up meant just having to own all parts of myself. Before that, I had maybe been, a baby fawn figuring out how to be gay. And once you're on stage and you're the gay guy who's talking at a stand-up club, you have to be pretty in charge of it. You have to know how it works. And I think that deciding to be that person really helped give my life and my sense of self shape.
Mm-hmm. And there's some more randomness to that as well. You talk about how using the internet sort of helped you to figure out who you were as a gay man as well. It helped you sort of reach out to a wider world that maybe you couldn't have before.
Yeah, and doing it anonymously. It was really valuable to be able to have to take my preconceived notions and the bigotry that the world had handed me and, test them and say, oh, no, these things aren't real. It was really valuable for me.
And have you read your Wikipedia page?
Of course.
I like that the only thing under personal life, there's one sentence under personal life in your Wikipedia, and that is...
Yes, Guy Branum is openly gay. I just think it's so ridiculous that we're still having to say openly gay. We can never say that anyone is closetly gay. And,
He's guardedly gay.
Yes. But, it is the most important thing to know about my personal life.
Mm-hmm. But it's the only thing there. You'd think that whoever writes find, a couple other things and say, maybe also he is.
Right. Yeah, but it's also, it's functional. It's why people need to stop being so terrified of talking about it, so it no longer is a, noteworthy issue that someone's gayness is open as opposed to closed.
Uh-huh. Well, one of the other things that I really enjoyed, you talked about there's an analysis of jokes and how effective they are for packing and unpacking pop culture. When did you realize that? Was that something that you knew before you were actually actively doing stand-up?
I don't know that I really understood the way that I had learned so much information from, so many facts from watching jokes and sitcoms. But I think stand-up probably did crystallize, but also just growing older and realizing the sheer number of things that I had learned perspective about from sitcom jokes.
Well, there's always a judgment in them as well. I mean, there's a...
Yeah. It's not just about, like, it's like, it took me forever to figure out what Moominshance was, but I knew the tone of the way I was supposed to think about it before I even really understood what it was.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But do you think that there needs to be a little meanness in a joke?
That's interesting. I think that jokes can be full of love, and there has to be knowledge in a joke. There has to be understanding in a joke. And, are jokes necessarily reductive? I mean, that's sort of what Hannah Gadsby said in Nanette. But I don't know. I think that that a punchline should be ambiguity that can be really big, and really encompassing.
Nanette has come up in a couple of different interviews. Actually, I'm finishing up an episode today with a horror and sci-fi writer by the name of David Wellington, and he actually brought up Nanette unprompted, and it led to a discussion of where does comedy go from here? Does that special have a giant effect on what comedians do in a practical sense from here on out?
I mean, I think most comedians in America will dismiss it, and already have, but, I don't think it was the most groundbreaking thing in the world. But it has made me think a lot about stand-up. I think what Gatsby was doing was trying to say, like, this medium was built for cis-het white men, and that coming into this space, she felt like she had to other herself. And I think, that's definitely how it's built, but it's not the only option. And, I also think her insistence that, like, jokes are necessarily reductive or violent is wrong. A joke doesn't tell the whole story, tell another joke. And I don't like her primacy of editorialized storytelling. I think stand-up is better where you're giving somebody the tools to make their own judgments and the tools to, like, embrace ambiguity as opposed to have a story be told for them. But, God knows it's made me think about what I do so much.
I also wanted to talk about talk show, the game show.
Mm-hmm.
You used to do this as a live show before it was a TV show. Is that true?
Yeah. We did it for 5 years, like around LA at comedy festivals, that kind of thing. And then eventually Wanda's producing partner saw it, and she said, let's turn it into a TV show.
Mm-hmm. And for those who don't know, it's somewhat self-explanatory. It is a talk show, which is also a game show, where the guests get scored. For being good at talk shows. Yeah. Yeah. It's just a structure I really loved and had a good time with. And, it was years ago that I first came to the decision that there's a right way and a wrong way to be on a talk show, and there should be a game show that rewarded people who are good at talk shows. But it wasn't until I hit kind of a really low point in my career that I was finally like, oh, hey, let's figure out what the rules for that would be. And then I started doing it, and it worked, and it was great. And, we've gotten to do 2 seasons of a TV show about it. I hope that there will be a third. Is that in question still? Is that still...
We're waiting to hear.
Uh-huh. Now, the guests study the point system. You do have the rules up on the website, I believe, right? Yeah. The goal is for people... some people come in and they understand it really well and they game it really hard. And then other people come in, Tiffany Haddish had no idea what was going on, but she killed it harder than anybody else had before. It struck me that it has the feel of the old match game in a way that the new match game doesn't. Oh, what do you mean by that? I think the first one was sort of self-aware and embraced the inherent silliness of a game show in the way that a game show hadn't before, and it felt like a dinner party we were all invited to watch, and it was something new and fresh.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. That was really the tone we were going for. Was, match game style, a cocktail party's going on. You get to be part of the fun.
Well, do you know when you'll know if it's coming back?
In the next month.
Okay. And how many jobs do you actively at the moment? I mean, you've got podcasting and TV writing and stand up and now the book.
I'm currently writing for a television show. I got the podcast. I got to promote this book, and I'm a stand-up. And that for me is a relatively, light load because I'm not having, and I'm also like developing other stuff. But the fact that I don't have a book to write anymore is pretty nice.
Would you do just one thing if you could?
No. I like this.
Does that have anything to do with just pure survival of always having to have something, having to have the next thing going? Or
yeah, I mean, it really is. It really is necessary in the field that I'm in, but it's also really cool because it means I get to do different things. Like as soon as I'm sick of performing, I have to go write. As soon as I'm sick of writing, I have to go perform.
So what's next? What should people look for? You have the book out now. What is the next thing you're looking for?
People should buy the book. But, I would love to create a narrative show that, I think that would be a different part of me to get to access.
Where can people find everything that you do?
GuyBranum.com is my website. People can follow me on social media at Guy Branum. And also, you should buy my book, My Life as a Goddess, available wherever books are sold.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, thank you very much for the conversation. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks. Thanks so much for having me.
An arrow to the head isn't always a trick.
Thanks again to Guy Branum for speaking with me for this week's episode. You can find out more about him, his tour dates, and what he's up to at his website, guybranum.com. Look for the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever you purchase your fine reading material. And watch out for notices about Talk Show, the game show. The show is currently in between seasons, and Branum is waiting to hear if he'll get the go-ahead from truTV for Season 3. And if you like this episode or any other episode of the Department of Tangents podcast, please consider subscribing and or rating and reviewing on your iTunes or Stitcher's account or your what-have-yous. This is a one-man operation, and I love doing it, and every little bit of help you can give is greatly appreciated. You can also find blog posts, photos, and videos on the website at departmentoftangents.com. And now this week's featured track, Everything, from the debut full-length by PR Newman, Turn Out. PR Newman is the solo project of Spencer Garland, the Austin-based multi-instrumentalist who, until a few years ago, had been mostly serving as a sideman in bands like the Berkshire Hounds. He played a lot of the parts and wrote almost all of the songs, save for Damn I Missed That Guy, written by fellow Austinite Willie McGee. I got the album in the mail a few weeks ago and took an immediate liking to it. It was hard to pick a song to feature this week for a few reasons. First, there are a lot of great songs on here. And second, Garland is all over the map sonically. Should I choose the cheeky Let's Go Meet in a Small Town, the strange and soulful Right Here, Yeah, the grooving Here Come the Rangers? No single song can represent the range of this album, so I chose the Kinks-like acoustic rocker Everything, partly because it's the designated single, and partly because it's just impossible not to bob your head along with the thing and try to sing the horn line. I haven't nailed it just yet. You can find out more about it at prnewman.com and tune in next week for my conversation with Garland. Until then, enjoy Everything by PR Newman.
Got it in blind, but happy and happy and change patterns, uncomfortable, and disruptions, unlimited experience. No syndication to be found around here. Necessarily lie, but I learned about myself to heed advice from bad sources, and everything I've admitted lately is about you or for you. I came from you. I've been moody, I've been angry, I've been confused, misguided and blind, but happy and happy and happy and happy and happy.
Let's check them both out. So, wait, what's my cue?
Neil Young,